We now conclude our look at Spinoza's Metaphysics with love and immortality. Now, according to Spinoza, the way you achieve the highest form of knowledge is by seeing things as part of an eternal, logically connected system caused by, of course, God. From this comes the intellectual love of God, that is, to quote Spinoza, our salvation or blessedness or freedom. And this, of course, is not the sort of love you typically would think of in the context of passionate, love songs, romantic comedies, etc. It's also not traditional piety, because, according to Spinoza, to quote him, he who loves God cannot strive that God should love him in return. So, why not? Why does God not love us? Well, in a way, he kind of does, but it's complicated. So as we saw earlier, according to Spinoza, God is not a person, so he doesn't have personal qualities. Also, God is self-determined, and so according to Spinoza, God is without passion, so he has no joy, he has no sorrow, he has no love, he has no hate. And so, given this, God is incapable of love, so he cannot love us. But then Spinoza says something that goes against this. We're modes of God. Again, using a bad analogy, we're like parts of God. And so, to quote Spinoza again, God, insofar as he loves himself, loves men. To use a bad analogy, your liver is part of you. So if you love yourself, you love your liver. So if God loves himself, he would love all the parts of him. So God would love everything. Now, Spinoza takes the view that this love of God is an intellectual love. It's not like a burning, passionate love, again, of the sort you would hear songs written about or have movies, etc. And it also provides an integrating vision of life. Now, this notion of a non-romantic love is not foreign to philosophy. Everyone's probably heard the sort of pop expression, platonic friends or platonic love. And Plato did have a theory of love, and there were different types of love. There'd be sort of the type of love you think of as romantic, etc. And then there are other types as well. And clearly, Plato is onto something. So, for example, the love one has of their boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, etc. is different from the love the person would have for their sister or brother or people in their church or their pets and so on. And the love someone has of, say, a sport they do would be different from their love of a person. And so you could have this type of intellectual love that's still love, just not the type of romantic love we normally think of when we think of love. So, on one hand, God does not love us because he cannot love. But then Spinoza also says that insofar as God loves himself, he loves us. So, a bit confusing there. But we should love God, at least according to Spinoza. So, his endgame here, again, is a comprehensive understanding, leading to this freedom. So how does this work? Well, he's offering what would be sort of a very practical guide to being free. And here's how it would work. You need a comprehensive understanding of the cause of emotions. And he provides the following analysis. He says that all emotions are a response to objects in the past, present, or future. So, for example, a person has regret is aimed at something in their past. If someone feels, anxiety or anticipation or desire, it's for something in the future. And then, of course, what they're feeling, right at this moment would be aimed at something in the present. So that seems true. Emotions respond to past, present, or future. So, seemingly correct. Now, where he gets controversial is here. He claims that all emotions are based on the illusion that events of the past and present could have been otherwise, and that the future is not determined. Now, I wouldn't go so far as to agree that all emotions are based on this, that it's an illusion, because you could, debate this. But let's look at it sort of, give them a plausible interpretation. So it does seem that we do, to feel about stuff, in a way we kind of have to believe what he claims, that the past and present could have been otherwise, and the future is not yet determined. So, for example, we think the past, we could have done things differently. So if we feel, say, regret at something we did do or something we didn't do, suppose there's something, you had an opportunity to do something, and for some reason decided to not do it, and now you regret it. Or perhaps there's something you did do, and now you feel kind of bad about doing it, like you're mean to somebody and you feel bad about it. And so to make sense of that, we'd have to think, I could have done something differently. I could have been less mean, or I could have been nice, or I could have done, gone on that trip that I chose not to. And similarly, we tend to feel based on thinking the future is not yet determined, because we have, hope. We hope things will be better. But if we knew they would not be better, we would not have presumably hope. Now, of course, you could still come up with a theory of emotions in which things are determined, but Spinoza does make sense here. Most of what we feel about stuff does seem to rest on the belief that we could have done otherwise, and that things are not yet set. And again, things like, regretting things, feeling hope, etc. So he claims that once you realize that all things happen of necessity, you'll be free of these emotions. Why? Well, because once you know that things couldn't have been different, you could not have done otherwise. So, no regrets. And of course, the future is determined. There's nothing you can do to make it different because it's going to be what it's going to be. So in a way you could say don't worry about it because there's nothing you can do, or so he claims. So how does this work? Well, he thinks realizing that all things happen of necessity, you couldn't have done otherwise, you can't do otherwise, everything's going to be as it is, nothing could be different. He thinks once you're free, you'll no longer feel completely dependent on your circumstances. And this will sound kind of weird, but then you'll be in control of your life, which is an odd thing to say because you're not in control of your life because your life is determined. Although one could say that you are in control in the sense that you are living what you're doing. But that's what he says. So insofar as the mind understands all things are necessary, so far has it greater power of the emotions, or suffers less from them. So he kind of rolls it back here a bit, in the sense that you won't be perfectly free from your emotions, you'll be suffering less from them. So to the degree you can accept that you couldn't have done otherwise. So if there's something you feel bad about, one way, again, as a practical matter, we often try to make ourselves feel better about stuff, justifiably or not, is we'll tell ourselves, well, I couldn't have done anything different. It's not my fault. And if we accept that, then I guess we would feel less regret. But of course, we'd also feel less hope, because the future is going to be what it is, and it will be what it is no matter what. Or, that's what he claims. So the path to liberation, rather ironically, is to recognize the necessity of events, and, much like the ancient Stoics said, to accept this with due resignation. In other words, the weird way to be free is to accept that you're not free, that everything is determined. So, how does this work? Well, Spinoza again distinguishes between types of freedom. So the freedom from this bondage to the passions, to our emotions, is not freedom from necessity, but the recognition and acceptance of this necessity. And again, it's rather like the ancient Stoics, who believed in determinism, but their view was, they took the view that you had control over how you felt about it, and so you could decide whether you felt, control your response. So Spinoza essentially saying is, once you realize that everything happens and of necessity, nothing could be otherwise, then you'll be free from your emotions, that you won't, be ruled by them, or so he claims. Now, of course, the irony here is, anytime a philosopher who says everything is determined gives people advice, they really can't obviously choose to accept that advice because there is no choice. So kind of odd. And so the feeling that one has, this freedom, this love of God, he says, is like the mental satisfaction of a mathematician, like solving an intellectual puzzle or problem, which may not be super appealing to everyone. So that's a solution. Realize that everything happens by necessity. You could not have done anything differently. Nothing in the future can be other than what it's going to be. You just don't know what it's going to be yet. So be free of your emotions and love God, and you'll be happy, according to him. So our final bit is immortality. So typically in many religions, they do offer some form of immortality. You might go to heaven if you're good, hell if you're bad, or you may keep reincarnating. But for Spinoza, you don't get traditional immortality. There is no conscious individual immortality. So the you that is you will come to an end and won't keep on going. So if Spinoza is right, you live, you die, and you are done. But he does allow kind of an odd sort of immortality, which is this. He says, to quote, "The human mind cannot be absolutely destroyed with the body, but something that remains which is eternal." How does this work? Well, each of us has a necessary place in the eternal order. And if our mind gets beyond the illusion of particularity and unites with the universal, the flow of temporal events cannot deny this hold on eternity. One way to put it is this: although someday each of us will die, different days most likely, it will always be true forever and ever that you once were. And that is your hold on eternity. It will always be true that you existed, and nothing can take that away from the eternal order. So in a way, I suppose that would be kind of reassuring. It shall always be true that we have been. And so stay safe, and I'll see you in the future.